Hello, dear StoryLiner enthusiasts! Welcome to this presentation of the new features of StoryLiner 1.1. Big feature to start with, StoryLiner now supports Blender 4.2. Well, it is not an extension yet, due to technical issues with the Python dependencies, but it is recognized as a legacy add-on and that works pretty well. For an installation in previous versions of Blender, see the dedicated videos in the StoryLiner channel. In Blender 4.2, the installation is a bit different. As previously, for advanced editions, you have to be connected to the internet and to launch Blender with administrator rights. On Windows, right-click on the Blender 4.2 icon and choose Run as Administrator. Go to the Preference panel and open the Add-on tab. Then click on the small drop-down component here and choose Install from Disk. Pick the zip file of StoryLiner and validate. Now, expand the StoryLiner Preference panel to check if everything is right. If the installation of the Python dependencies didn't go well, then see the full installation video in the channel or in the FAQ in the documentation. While we are here, the following features are also coming with StoryLiner 1.1. Add-on can now be turned off and on again without losing the preferences, thanks to an autosave behavior. Based on the save mechanics, it is possible to export settings and import them to another instance of Blender. On the Tools and UI side, we have some new features too. Below the playbar, we now have a set of options to improve the visualization of the animation during the playback. The Synch option has been exposed here. It is a Blender standard setting available in the timeline and used to control the frames display when the playback frame rate is too low. When checked, this option will make the Passepartout of the cameras opaque so that you get a better view of the frame content. Note that in the Shots Global Control panel, you can set the opacity of the Passepartout for all the shots at once. Last option, the Best Play Performance has been moved here. This activates a configuration that offers a better frame rate during the playback. In the shot properties, it is now possible to directly tweak the depth of field options of the camera. We can also activate the display of the thirds and center composition guides. At last, in the main panel, some parts of the UI are now responsive, in order to facilitate the use of the controls when the panel has a reduced size. The next feature is a new viewport frame, so let's get into a common drawing context in StoryLiner. We build layout, then we go to the 2.5D panel and we pick a free grease pencil object such as this character. As a 3D artist, you've probably experienced that moment when you forgot that the AutoKey mode was on, only to realize after a while that you completely messed up your scene. That's why I introduced this visual feedback feature that I called the viewport frame. This proved to be very effective, so I applied the same approach to the Multiframe mode in StoryLiner 1.1. So that green frame here tells you that the Multiframe mode is turned on. This significantly reduces your cognitive load, allowing you to focus better on the drawings. Should you want to disable these behaviors, go to the StoryLiner preference and toggle the viewport frame checkboxes. StoryLiner was designed from the ground up for production, and one of its very first features was the ability to ensure that the data created with the add-on were consistent with the project requirements. That's the project settings. They are located in the main menu of StoryLiner, and they hold the configuration of the project. The name of the project, the naming convention for the new shots and sequences, the render settings, like the resolution, the frame rate, and the output file formats. Once the settings are activated, we see that they are being used because the name of the project appears at the top of the StoryLiner panel, and from now on, they override several settings of the scene, those related to the rendering in particular. Well, unless if you bypass them. Long-awaited new feature. It is now possible to use a customized configuration of stamp info in your project. Stamp info is the module of StoryLiner that handles the information written on output images. You can save the settings as a JSON file and reference it in the project settings by picking it thanks to this new field. Another major improvement in StoryLiner 1.1, the project settings mode have been extended to provide the ability to have all the scenes of a Blender file reference the same settings configuration. Note that the project settings mode is dependent of the instance of StoryLiner, so each scene can have its own project settings mode. Brief reminder, you can either not use the project settings at all. In this case, the scene settings are used for the rendering. Use the local project settings for the ground scene mode. This is great for local use of StoryLiner. Or use the reference project settings for the ground scene mode. If you want each scene of the file to use the same settings, you have to set the reference file manually for each one of them. This is good for small projects, or if you intend to use scenes with different settings. In StoryLiner 1.1, a new mode has been added, Reference Project Settings for the entire Blender file. This one ensures that every new scene created with the Blender file is already pre-configured and points to the same project settings as the first scene, even if this one is changed. Even better, with the Studio Edition, it is now possible to run Blender in the context of a project. Thanks to the use of a customized shortcut, a specified instance of Blender can be launched with a configuration where every new scene for every new file is pointing to the same project settings file. This is a recommended way to go for mid to large scale projects. It saves a lot of configuration time to the artists and ensures them to use the right settings, and at the same time it provides a full control of the project configuration to the pipeline technical directors. I did several small fixes here and there based on new bug reporting. You can see the changelog for the details. I also improved the documentation, discover for example how to create a template file for the new cameras, manage the shot backgrounds, or set the Blender shortcut to launch it in a project context. Thank you all for your feedback. Feel free to add feature requests in the support GitHub and create great stories.